Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Richard Allen Turner. I'm a board-certified pediatrician. Welcome to my channel, Kids Info Network Dayton. I hope you enjoy the show. Focus Kids is coming right up. Ten minutes ahead of schedule.
That was so fun. I thought that was the best one.
I thought so too. I actually thought the meeting making one was going to take a lot longer. I wasn't even sure if we were going to get through that one in an hour. So I'm really glad we did, because I really wanted to get to this, because I talk to parents all the time about just, you have to be the one in charge, but that doesn't mean that you have to be rigid and you have to be the absolute boss all the time, every minute of the day. There is room for, age-appropriate choices for a child to make. And I told one dad one time, because he had a 5 or 6 year old that was having behavior problems, and so I went through and asked him how a typical day goes and how he handles difficult behavior. And he was just way on the end of authoritative, almost to the point of being laissez-faire. And then when he had to try to clamp down, the child thought of him more as his playmate. And so I talked to him about, you have to be in control, you have to be in charge, and he has to know. And he looked at me, almost had tears in his eyes. He goes, does that mean I can't play video games with him anymore? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no. I'm like, but when it comes down to it, he has to know that you're in charge. And kids don't know how to be in charge, because they have to learn that. So if they sense that you're not in charge, that's actually very uncomfortable emotionally for a child. So they need to know that you're in charge for them to be able to feel safe.
Right. So. The feeling safe, I think, is certainly foundational to what's going on. And children who don't experience boundaries. Barry Brazelton always said that next to love, boundaries were the most important. Discipline was the most important thing that you could do. And he meant setting boundaries in this authoritative kind of way, I think very much the way Claudia talks about it. And the child who does not have those boundaries is in a world in which, in a sense, they're both too powerful and it's too frightening for them. And the parent in overdevelopment is titrating what it is that the child is capable of setting boundaries of their own in terms of what they can do and what they can't do.
So if I had to do it all over again, I would frame the conversation differently. I would say it's authoritarian versus permissive parenting, and then authoritative parenting is something that encompasses
in between
both of those things and is fundamentally different from both of them.
So we're going to have to do another program, Richard.
Again, I have to rewrite the book because it doesn't say that in the book.
No, that's probably a more appropriate way of thinking about it.
But I also think what you said to this father, and just to reiterate what I said, is that there's a real need to recognize the messiness of all of parenting, just like we talk about the messiness of relationships. There's good enough mothering. Winnicott didn't say, oh, there's good enough authoritative parenting. or there's good enough authoritarian. He's saying it's good enough, and I think parents come in believing it's the question that you get asked all the time, Claudia. You too, probably, Richard. You know, what do I do? What's the perfect thing to do? And a recognition that over time, there's going to be a lot of variation in what you do, even if you are doing it perfectly. And doing it perfectly is probably to have a lot of variation.
All right.
Hey, Rich, why don't you re-ask that question and go to splice that in there, like how she said.
Yeah.
I think, well,
I'm trying to think of a way to even.
You could redo that part back over. I think you got time.
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. It's, I don't know.
You know what? I could just reframe the question and edit it in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. They don't need to be
here.
here. Yeah. Instead
Like
of how can authoritative, just say how can permissive
just
parenting
do it like,
be problematic.
Yeah.
So overly permissive.
I think what you're doing now is called fake news, Richard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's fine the way it is. It's messy, and I mean, as I said, that's the way it is in the book. It says authoritarian versus authoritative. So we don't have to rewrite history, but I think it's included in our conversation. This whole idea.
And I'll just splice this in before we say, you know, that's it and blah 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 blah. I can always move. I can move clips. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of editing.
You can be authoritarian.
I can. I can say this is my show, and I'm doing it the way I want to.
There you go. You got it.
All right. Thanks, guys. I think that is a wrap now. So, and I said it on the previous episode, which will be the final episode, but thank you both so much. And you both are always welcome to come back. You know, as I move on with this show, you know, maybe next year, I do want to talk about some of your other books at some point, and then some of your other work. So, but you know, you both are always welcome to come back together individually. So I really enjoy talking to you, and I've learned a lot. So I've learned a lot myself. So that we don't see in pediatric training. So.
Well, please, oh my gosh, I love the fact that because it just causes me a lot of distress that this is so siloed from pediatricians training, all this knowledge, and it's you can be a great intermediary bringing this to your.
Yeah. I've been practicing for 12 years, and you get that all the time with behavior. What do I do to fix it? And you just want to come up with an answer that's going to say, this is going to do it, and next week everything's going to be fine. But that's just not reality. And so,
hey, I just had a great idea. Let's do a proposal for the AAP meeting and show the conversations with us.
Oh,
you think they'd ever accept it? I mean, it's not research, but
it's not research. Well, but what you guys have done is research. So
maybe you could propose a presentation, composite of all the videos.
You talk about
Claudia has heard this, and this idea, her idea, could certainly be part of it. But I have a bit of a hobby horse, which is my hobby horse. It has never had any impact, which is that especially in terms of pediatrics, that we need a total revamping of the training in pediatrics, and
it's got to include more behavioral and more, because that's what, I mean, honestly, half of pediatrics is behavioral stuff. Right. It's got to include more psychiatry, psychology.
The way I see it, which is that there's a practitioner who's trained in well child development. That means they learn how to do and they're really capable of doing well child care. So they deal with the typical ear infections, streps, all of those kinds of things, which are, I won't say fairly straightforward, but which have to do with well child care, the typical kinds of problems, the ear infections and the like. And on the other side, they get trained in child development and a really healthy training in listening and in hearing what other people are saying. So learning how to do mismatch and repair or something like that. And that practitioner, not unlike our primary care persons, recognizes problems that are beyond their skill because they've not been trained in them. They've not been trained in how to do, a child who's developing diabetes, or a child who's having some serious kind of problem, or a child who has, hyperactivity in an extreme form. And so they refer out, which is the model that we have for a lot of primary care. But in pediatrics, I think we've, in a sense, burdened the pediatrician with not only all this elaborate training in illnesses, some of which are real zebras that maybe you never see in your career. And we don't train them sufficiently, as you both have said, in terms of well child care and working with parenting, and understanding, the child, different kinds of parenting styles. And so it would be a really quite different order of training. And then we could have pediatricians who want to be pediatricians and deal with, the complicated medical problems that children have, while the parents and the child are still being held by this new practitioner. So if you want to do a conference, I'll join to do that. But nobody has ever listened to me on this.
Well, I mean, and you can even see just where the emphasis is, at least on the primary board exam. It's like there's so many zebras. I mean, on the board exam, they'll ask you about, they'll ask about Rett syndrome, but they won't ask about Rett syndrome. They'll ask, what is the gene that encodes? Who cares? I mean, honestly, in everyday practice, what does that matter unless you're a geneticist? It doesn't teach you. It doesn't teach a new pediatrician to get in the mindset of how do we manage this? How do we help parents manage this? These isolated, if you're interested in what gene causes what disease, there's Google. You can look it up. There needs to be more training in how to talk to people, how to manage, these difficult, complex behavioral issues, and more training in abnormal development. We get very good training in normal, typical childhood development, but when you bring somebody in and hand them an ASQ and it's all over the place, there's not much training. Now, I've learned through doing this, especially in rural practice now, because we're 50 miles away from an academic center either way, and you have to take on more of that. Otherwise you're just going to, people, especially in the population that we serve, they have transportation issues. They're not going to be able to get to all these appointments. So you have to try to manage locally and call a specialist if you're stuck. But to try to refer these kids, out all the time, it's not feasible for the families. So,
Yeah.
All right, guys, I got to run.
Yep.
But
Anyway, Richard, please stay in touch. Keep me on whatever mailing lists you have, and
you
I would
both
love
are
to
in
come
my
back
email.
at some point.
Good. I would love to have both of you back.
great.
So,
Thank you
all
so
right.
much for
So
everything.
I'll read
Thanks a
some
lot.
of your other
This has
stuff,
been
and then
really
we'll
fun.
get back.
Yeah.
Me too. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Bye, guys.
Take care.